A pregnant German shepherd abandoned in a derelict factory on a stormy night. A lonely former combat medic stumbles in, unaware he's about to face a life-or-death birth, where the line between survival and surrender is as fragile as breath. But what happened next changed the rest of his life. The autumn rain poured over Oakridge's old industrial district, as if the sky was shedding all the sorrow it had bottled up through summer. Water spilled over rusted metal roofs, down forgotten alleyways, once the heart of production, now only the realm of shadows and dust. Beneath that curtain of rain, a man moved slowly through the freezing puddles, his army boots soaked, but pressing forward in silence and resilience. Ryan, 43 years old, a former military medic with 3 tours in Afghanistan, was now just a shadow living inside his memories. His face was worn eyes, sunken with chronic insomnia. He wasn't searching for anything in these abandoned buildings. He was just running from the explosions still echoing in his mind, from the pity in people's eyes downtown, from the feeling that he no longer belonged in a peaceful world. This had become Ryan's routine, aimless twilight walks, his camera slung over his shoulder, a pretense to capture ruins soon to be erased. But tonight, fate wouldn't let him just pass through. As Ryan stepped into a decaying factory once used for aerospace parts, the rain pounded the rusted metal roof so hard it drowned all other sounds. And then, he stopped. A different sound surfaced, faint, weak, barely distinguishable between wind and water. Whimpering, Ryan strained his ears. A quiet sob, broken and thin like breath, choked by pain. Not a rat, not the wind. It was the cry of a creature dying. His instincts surged to the surface. Deep within him, the command, "Move to the casualty," rang out just like in the field. Ryan advanced quickly. Flashlight scanning piles of rubble grime smeared across the cold concrete floor. And then he saw it. In the darkest corner beneath a collapsed metal rack was a crude nest of torn cardboard and filthy blankets. There, a German shepherd lay on her side, body convulsing in waves of pain. Her belly was swollen fur, soaked and streaked with blood. One hind leg trembled. Her mouth gasped for air, no longer able to bark. Her eyes met Ryan's. No panic, no aggression, only a plea, a silent, desperate request that hit him straight in the heart. Ryan froze. That look, he had seen it before, in the final gazes of wounded soldiers lying on field stretchers, surrounded by helicopter blades and falling bombs. This wasn't a wild animal. This was a mother, fighting to hold on just long enough to protect what mattered most, her unborn pups. "Dear God," Ryan whispered, dropping to his knees and pulling his battered medical kit to his chest. He didn't know what he could do, but he knew one thing: he would not leave. He would not let her die alone. In the darkness of that broken factory, Ryan, the soldier who thought he'd lost all feeling, began a new kind of battle. Not against an enemy, but against time. Fate, and the still unhealed wounds buried deep inside his heart. Heidi, the name etched into the dull metal tag, barely visible beneath her soaked fur, trembled in waves. Each contraction struck her frail shepherd body like a hammer, reverberating through muscles worn thin from exhaustion and hunger. Ryan stepped closer gently, still keeping his distance. "Heidi, is that your name?" he read aloud, letting his voice fill the space to drown out the rain pounding on the roof. He knew she wouldn't understand the words, but the way she looked at him, he felt she did. She heard. She hoped. Under his flashlight beam, he saw one of her legs tremble. Lift, then drop. Blood pooled beneath her. A puppy, the first of the litter, had partially emerged, but was stuck at the shoulders. Too long. Too dangerous. Ryan cursed under his breath. He had witnessed dozens of complicated births, even performed field cesareans on women in war zones, under conditions worse than this. But this was the first time he'd have to apply those techniques to a four-legged life. He pulled out his battered military medic kit, still kept from his days in the unit. Antiseptic, gauze, a maul blade, and water. He poured a little into a canteen lid and brought it near Heidi's mouth. She licked weakly. Her eyes never left his. Trust. Ryan felt it, not the obedient gaze of a domesticated animal, but a primal instinct. She sensed he had come to help, not to hurt. He grimaced as another contraction tore through her body. Heidi letting out a sharp cry as the puppy shifted, then lodged again. No time to call a vet. No signal. She'll die. And so will the pups. Not on his watch. Not with these hands. Ryan shrugged off his coat. Rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, revealing arms. Riddled with old scars. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the adrenaline building fast. He was back in combat mode, that switch medics could flip in a single heartbeat. "All right, Heidi," he whispered gently, resting his hand on her head. "You're not alone." Heidi didn't snarl, didn't resist. She only panted and let him in. Ryan assessed the pup's position. Shoulders misaligned, wedged in the canal. He needed to rotate it just enough for the shoulder joint to slide through. Not much, just the right angle. He placed 2 fingers beneath the tiny body, moving with the caution of someone cradling a glass sculpture in the middle of a battlefield. "Hang in there, girl," he murmured. One last push. Heidi whimpered. Another contraction surged. Ryan felt the faintest effort behind it, her body doing everything it could. And then, a turn. A gasp. And a tiny wet body slipped out, landing in his hands. A small bundle of fur, slick with fluid and blood, unmoving. No breath. No sound. No twitch. Ryan's heart clenched. No, not like this. With the reflex of a man who'd stolen lives back from the Brink, he tilted the puppy's head, cleared the airways, then gently rubbed the tiny chest in slow, rhythmic motions. "Come on, little one. Come on. We're not stopping here." Gasp. A shaky inhale, weak but real. A twitch in his palm. A faint whimper, like a church bell ringing in the depths of hell. Heidi lifted her head, her eyes alive with light. Ryan placed the pup beside her, letting her lick it with her cracked, dry tongue, tending to it, as mothers have always done. He slumped onto the cold cement floor. Rain and sweat soaked his body. His heart pounded against his ribs. He had saved a life. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he still mattered. The rain hadn't stopped. It kept falling with the steady rhythm of someone who had just escaped a nightmare, urgent, restless, but no longer violent. Ryan leaned back against a rotting pallet, breath ragged. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still rushing through his veins. It was that old feeling again, the one he used to know after reviving a soldier on the battlefield. But this time was different. The life he had just saved wasn't a comrade. It was a tiny, wet, whimpering creature lying between his cold hands. Heidi licked her firstborn with a tenderness that made Ryan pause. She was still panting, the contractions hadn't stopped. But her eyes were different now, no longer filled with despair. Instead, focus, instinct. A mother, a fighter, refusing to give up. Ryan stood up and pulled the wet jacket from his pack, laying it down over a patch of concrete nearby. As the beam of his flashlight passed over the fur at Heidi's neck, something glinted. A dark, weathered patch of leather was caught in her matted coat. Carefully, so as not to startle her, Ryan reached in, and peeled it back. Beneath the soaked fur was an old cracked leather collar, and on it a single metal tag. Rusted, faded, but still legible, Heidi. He read the name aloud, whispering it like calling out to a fallen soldier. Heidi. The name echoed in the shadowed wreckage of the abandoned factory like a quiet confirmation. She was not a stray. Not a stray dog, Ryan muttered, his fingers gently holding the tag. You had someone once. He looked at Heidi. Her eyes flickered, maybe at the sound of her name. Maybe not, but enough to twist something deep in his chest. Who leaves a creature like this during labor? In the rain, in a dark, cold ruin. Ryan clenched his fist, jaw tight. He had seen horrific things on the battlefield, but sometimes the cruelty back home felt worse than the sound of gunfire. Another contraction. Heidi whimpered, her entire frame curling inward. Ryan dropped back beside her. But this time, something was wrong. No amniotic fluid, no movement, no sign of a second puppy. He placed a hand gently on her belly. The muscle spasms were erratic. She was fading. Her breathing was labored, her eyes glazed. She can't deliver here, he muttered. If the next one stuck like before, she won't make it. His eyes scanned the ruined factory, leaking ceilings, swirling wind metal rust piles of garbage. This could become a grave if they stayed. He swept his flashlight across the space and saw it. A small control room in the distance, wooden door window still intact. Dry. Safer. I have to get her there, he whispered. Even if I have to carry both of them. Heidi lifted her head. Their eyes met. And somehow, he knew she understood. Hang on, girl, he said. We're going to get through this. I promise. The rain outside pounded furiously against the rusted tin roof, each impact echoing like mortar fire crashing down. Inside the factory, Ryan crouched beside Heidi, the exhausted mother. She panted heavily, her eyes unfocused from the relentless pain. At her feet lay the first pup, tiny, limp, but breathing with the same breath they had both fought to steal back from death's grasp. Ryan placed his hand gently on Heidi again. Her belly was still swollen, at least one, maybe two more pups, but she had no strength left. Every attempt to push ended in trembling, then collapse, gasping. He knew if they stayed here, she wouldn't make it. The cold rain was seeping into her skin, and the concrete floor beneath her was far too cold. If any complication arose, he'd need space light and shelter, not rusted ruins and dripping leaks. Ryan wrapped his soaked jacket around his pack, propping it under Heidi's belly to insulate her from the floor. Then he gathered all the tattered blankets and pieces of cardboard scattered nearby, assembling something that resembled a makeshift stretcher. As he worked, he whispered, "Hold on, Heidi. You can't give up. Those little ones need you. I do too." Heidi didn't resist. She looked at him not with fear, but with the gaze of a mother entrusting her entire fate to a stranger. It wasn't instinct anymore. It was something deeper, pure trust, primal, haunting. Ryan slid his strong arms beneath the makeshift stretcher, moving slowly to avoid sudden jolts. One arm beneath her shoulders, the other under her hips. With a deep breath, he lifted her along with the newborn pup nestled in his jacket. She was heavy, but nothing compared to carrying a 90-kilo soldier from the front line to a medevac point. He moved quickly, but carefully, eyes locked on the control room at the far end of the factory. The flickering beam of his flashlight cast a fragile thread of hope through the dark. Outside, lightning split the sky. A flash of stark white light pierced through shattered windows. Wind howled down the concrete corridors, like spirits screaming in the storm. With every step, Ryan gripped his backpack tighter, cradling Heidi's entire little family in his arms. A sudden sound behind made him freeze. Clang! A metal beam fell from the ceiling, smashing to the floor. Heidi whimpered softly, not from pain, but protection. Ryan felt her whole body go rigid in his arms, shielding the fragile pup still breathing faintly beneath her. "It's all right," he whispered, tilting his head to block them from the debris. "We're almost there." He kicked open the old wooden door, creak, and stepped inside. The control room was cold, but dry. The windows were still intact, blocking out the rain. A few rotten desks rusted file cabinets, but the far corner was cleaner than the rest of the factory, enough to create a safe berthing space. Ryan set Heidi down onto a nest of jackets, laying 2 layers of cardboard beneath. He quickly checked her breathing. Still there. Weak, but steady. He pulled 2 old cotton pads from the medical kit and gently wiped her damp belly. "It's just you and me now, Heidi," he said, whispering, as he checked the next pup's position. "But this time, we've got shelter in time. We'll make it." Heidi lifted her head and rested her muzzle gently on his leg. A silent, wordless touch, just a thank you spoken in breath and heartbeat. Inside the abandoned control room, only the heavy breathing of Heidi and the rhythmic tapping of rain on foggy glass could be heard. Ryan knelt beside her, his sleeves rolled high, hands stained with blood and amniotic fluid. The hands that had once saved countless comrades on the battlefield were now holding the most fragile form of life, a puppy stuck mid-delivery. Heidi trembled with another contraction. Ryan leaned in closer. The hind legs of the second puppy had emerged, but the angle was off. Its shoulder was caught just like the first one. But this time, Heidi didn't have the strength to push. Ryan took a deep breath. Sweat and rain clung to his brow. He spoke softly, voice steady like every emergency he'd ever faced. "You're doing great, Heidi, but this little one needs one last push. I'll help. Don't give up." From his backpack, he pulled the last of his supplies, a few alcohol swabs, a roll of gauze, some elastic tourniquets, a folding knife, and a mud-streaked flashlight. He disinfected his hands with alcohol, rubbed warmth back into his fingers, the way he used to before field surgeries in Afghanistan. "Puppy number 2, he whispered, voice as soft as breath. "We're getting through this together." Ryan gently inserted his fingers to guide the puppy's shoulder into place, moving slowly, as if disarming a live explosive. One wrong move could mean fatal injury. Heidi let out a long cry, her legs twitching, but she didn't bite, didn't thrash. She surrendered to his hands not from exhaustion, but from absolute trust. Then a small shift. Ryan felt it. The shoulder slipped slightly downward. "All right, little one," he muttered, voice hoarse from holding his breath. "It's time to meet the world." The next contraction came like a wave. Heidi strained her whole body, lifting slightly. Ryan braced the tiny shoulders with 2 fingers, and the second puppy slipped free in a rush of blood and fluid. But silence. The pup lay limp in Ryan's hands. No movement, no sound. Eyes shut tight, chest still. It wasn't the first time Ryan had held life slipping away in his hands. But this time, it wasn't a soldier. It was a being that hadn't even opened its eyes to see the world. "No," he gasped. "No. Not this time." He quickly cleared his airway with gauze, rubbed the tiny chest with thumb and forefinger, then leaned down and blew a gentle puff of air, just enough to trigger a breath reflex. He repeated the motion, hands trembling not from cold, but from dwindling hope. Heidi tried to lift her head, eyes wide open. She knew. She felt it. 1, 2, 3, and then a weak gasp. The puppy shuddered, twitched, and let out a soft cry, its very first sound of life. Ryan leaned back, eyes stinging from rain, or tears, he couldn't tell. He placed the pup beside Heidi. She immediately began licking it all over, warming it with pure maternal instinct. "Second warrior has landed," Ryan whispered. "Once again we win." He slumped against the wall of the control room, head in his hands, breathing hard. Body drained, but spirit lightened. Outside, thunder still growled. But inside this battered old room, a small victory had just been won. Not glorious, but profound. And real. Heidi and her 2 puppies were now settled into the makeshift nest Ryan had crafted. An old coat, tattered blanket scraps, and layers of cardboard pressed down over cold concrete. The beam of the flashlight wavered with the draft, its light dancing across mold-streaked walls, like flickers of memory flashing in Ryan's mind. He sat close to her now, no distance between man and dog, no longer soldier and animal. Only 2 living beings who had survived ruin and time. As he reached out to adjust the blanket over Heidi, his hand caught on something rigid beneath the thick fur at her neck. A leather strap, edges worn. A collar. Ryan frowned. He gently parted the matted fur and turned the collar over. A small metal tag rusted from moisture and time, nearly illegible. But he didn't give up. He pulled a clean cloth from his first aid kit and wiped each mark as if he were handling a battlefield relic. And then he saw it. Heidi, a name hand-etched simple, but like a beam of light piercing the night. "You're not a stray," he whispered. "You have a name. You had someone. You had a past." Heidi simply looked at him, her deep brown eyes shimmering with something that looked a lot like sorrow. Ryan sat still. Questions spun in his mind. Who left her behind? How long had she wandered alone? Why a creature so clearly intelligent and instinctive had been forced to give birth in a derelict factory? And what made her trust a stranger, even as the lives of her pups hung by a thread? Ryan exhaled heavily. He knew that feeling, being discarded, removed from the system, labeled as no longer useful. He'd been a soldier, a combat medic, and now just an unemployed veteran, living on benefits and volunteering at an animal rescue center. He and Heidi had more in common than he thought. "All right, Heidi," he said softly, using her name for the first time, her real name. Heidi stirred slightly, as if some reflex made her tilt her head to listen better. "We'll find out what happened," he said, Bartolo resolute. "I won't let you be forgotten again. I promise." A new contraction hit, making Heidi whimper. Ryan instantly switched from emotion to action. "There's more," he muttered. "At least one more puppy." He checked her breathing. Not good. Heart rate weak. Breathing shallow and rapid. Her body was completely exhausted. A mild fever had begun to rise. Ryan clenched his hand into a fist. There wasn't much time left. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside, a decision was forming. One that would change Ryan and Heidi's lives forever. The rain fell steadily outside the abandoned building, like a cold soundtrack to a long, unforgiving night. In the dark corner of a small room, the only source of light came from a flashlight propped up against a broken wooden crate. Heidi lay still, except for the violent contractions that made her body shudder in waves. Ryan leaned in to check. The mother dog's breathing was labored, her muscles rigid. One hind leg twitched faintly. She was entering the next stage of labor, but there was no sign of a third pup. He could feel it. Something wasn't right. "Hang in there, Heidi," he whispered, placing his hand gently on her abdomen. He pressed slightly. A strange sensation met his fingertips, a firm, round mass. A third puppy still inside. Not moving. Dangerous. It hadn't progressed through the birth canal properly. It might be in the wrong position. If left alone, it could damage Heidi's uterus. If Ryan miscalculated during the delivery, she could die. The entire litter would lose their mother. He looked around the bare room. No medical equipment, no stretcher, no anesthesia, no help. All he had was instinct and a decision: stay and attempt another risky delivery. In this unsanitary, cold, damp environment. And if he failed, they would all die. Or take her, move to the animal clinic nearly 2 kilometers away, the one where he used to volunteer. But moving a dog in heavy labor through the rain, carrying only what he had. It was suicide. He looked at Heidi. She looked back. That gaze, not panic, just exhaustion and waiting. Trust. "I won't let you die here," Ryan said softly. His voice was hoarse, but his eyes burned with resolve. "We don't give up like this. Not while I'm still standing." He dug into his backpack, pulled out a piece of cord and his outer jacket. An idea flashed through his mind. A bold one. He would make an emergency stretcher, tying Heidi in place by securing her sides and legs with strips from the jacket and any leftover cloth. Then he would drag her step by step through the storm to the clinic. The 2 newborn pups would be wrapped in the last dry towel he had tucked into the inside of his shirt, kept warm by his own body heat. "We will survive," he repeated, as if to convince himself. Heidi exhaled heavily, her eyes blinking slowly. Not agreement, but quiet acceptance. She would entrust her life to this man. This stranger who had risked everything to save her pups in the middle of a storm. Ryan draped his coat over Heidi's head, shielding her from the biting rain. Then he leaned down, grasped the front of the makeshift stretcher, clenched his teeth, and pulled. His entire body strained, muscles stretched to the edge of tearing. The rain poured harder. Wind slapped his face, but he didn't stop. Rain lashed his face like a whip. Heavy droplets pounded Ryan's coat, soaking through to his skin, chilling him to the bone. He hunched forward, both hands gripping the front of the makeshift stretcher, dragging Heidi's trembling body across a road littered with mud and broken stones. The night swallowed all sense of direction. Only the faint beam of a flashlight, strapped awkwardly to his shoulder, cut a flickering path through fog and thick rain. Each pull sent searing pain through his lower back. His shoulders ached, muscles tight as though they might tear. But Ryan did not stop. He couldn't. Against his chest, beneath the damp layers of his jacket, the 2 newborn puppies lay quietly, tightly swaddled in a woolen scarf, nestled against the warmth of the man who had fought to save them. He could feel their tiny movements, soft twitches, the occasional weak nudge. They were alive. Heidi lay motionless on the stretcher, her body trembling with ongoing contractions. She didn't cry. She didn't growl. She simply looked at him. Deep brown eyes of a mother's soul in silent agony, watching each of Ryan's movements with quiet surrender. "We're almost there," Ryan muttered, though he wasn't sure. His voice rasped, worn out. His mouth, dry lips salty from rain and sweat. Each turn in the road stretched endlessly. He slipped twice, knees slamming into cracked concrete. But he got back up. He didn't quit. Not when lives were waiting to be saved. His mind drifted back to the war years. He had dragged wounded soldiers through gunfire, screamed orders through explosions, clung to fading pulses with nothing but hope and pressure. But never, not once, had he felt so alone. and never, not once, had he felt so needed. Then a light. A low building shimmered into view beyond an old wooden fence. Oakridge Animal Clinic. "We made it, Heidi," he rasped. With everything he had left, he pulled the stretcher up the final incline. The light above the emergency entrance was still on. Thank God. They hadn't closed yet. He slammed his hand against the glass door over and over, yelling with all he had left. "Emergency. She's giving birth. I need help now." The door swung open. A woman in a white coat rushed out. Ellie Ramirez, the on-call veterinary surgeon, followed by a night nurse. They both grabbed the stretcher just in time. "Dear God," Ellie murmured. "She won't last much longer." Inside now, Ryan carried the 2 puppies in with Heidi. He didn't let go, not for a second. And then, it was as if someone lifted the weight from his shoulders. He wasn't alone anymore. The emergency room door closed behind Ryan, leaving the sound of rain like a distant memory. Inside, the air was bright with fluorescent light, heavy with the smell of antiseptic anesthesia and urgency. Heidi was placed gently onto the operating table as Ellie and 2 technicians began working with practiced precision. "She's severely dehydrated," Ellie said, glancing at the vital monitor. "Blood pressure's low, uterus is exhausted. There's at least 1 more pup inside." Ryan stood in the corner, still holding the 2 puppies close to his chest. Though he was drier now, he trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from fear. He had watched his comrades bleed out in the field, had stitched wounds in trenches by flashlight. But now, lying on that table was a creature that couldn't speak, couldn't plead, and yet had placed absolute trust in him. Ellie turned to him. "Ryan, I need you to stay. Heidi trusts you. She'll stay calmer if she sees you." He nodded and stepped to the head of the table. Heidi was breathing hard, eyes dulled from exhaustion, but they fluttered open slightly as he approached. Ryan gently took her paw, steady and warm. "I'm here. You're not alone, Heidi." Ellie began the assisted birth procedure, carefully palpating the abdomen, guiding the contractions, administering oxytocin. Surgery wasn't an option. Heidi was too weak. Everything depended on her body's response. The room held its breath as a new contraction began. Heidi tensed. Blood. Amniotic fluid. A soft sound. Heidi's quiet whimper pained, but not desperate. "There it is," Ellie exclaimed. "I see the head. Just a little more." Ryan leaned in close, whispering, "Come on, Heidi. Just a little more. You've come this far." And then, like a miracle, a tiny puppy slick with white fur and streaked with blood slid out of Heidi's body. Ellie caught it swiftly, cleaned it, and began stimulating its breathing. 1, 2, 3, then 4 seconds. The little body stirred, then a soft gasp. The first cry, a faint trembling sound, but unmistakably alive. Tears welled in Ryan's eyes. He didn't sob. He just let them fall silent streaks down his weathered cheeks. Heidi exhaled, deeply, closing her eyes. Not passing out, but at peace. Ellie smiled. "She's a fighter, and so are you." "Ryan." Ryan looked down at the newborn pup nestled against its mother's chest and knew this moment would change him forever. The morning light poured gently through the treatment room's window, casting a soft gold hue across the thin curtain. The rain had long stopped, and in the hush that followed the storm, something felt different, not only outside, but within those who had endured the long night of life and death. Ryan sat in the cushioned chair beside the hospital bed, his head bowed toward Heidi. His hand still rested on her soft ear, stroking gently, as if that small gesture tethered him to reality. Heidi was sleeping, her breathing deep and even. Nestled against her side were 4 tiny puppies huddled together like fresh seedlings, sprouting in damp earth. All of them had survived. Each little life carried a bit of the miracle that had emerged from the stormy night. Ellie stepped in, carrying a breakfast tray and a medical chart. She paused for a few seconds, quietly taking in the scene before her, then smiled. "You didn't sleep all night, did you?" Ryan nodded slightly, his voice low and hoarse. "I couldn't take my eyes off them. She's going to be fine. And so are the little ones," Ellie said, placing the tray on the table. "Heidi's recovering faster than I expected, but—" She hesitated. "There's something I need to tell you." Ryan turned to her. The lightness in Ellie's expression had faded. "We found faint scarring on Heidi's abdomen," she said softly. "It's possible she was kept in a breeding facility, one of those places where mother dogs are forced to give birth repeatedly. And when they're no longer useful, they're abandoned." Ryan's fists clenched. The invisible wounds he carried from the battlefield had never truly healed, and now faced with another kind of cruelty. His chest ached again, not for himself, but for the brave dog who had endured everything just to protect her young. "She fought no less than a soldier," he said slowly. "And I won't let anyone use her or throw her away ever again." Ellie nodded. "I'll take care of the paperwork, but if you're really going to adopt Heidi and the pups, you know this isn't just rescue. This is a promise." Ryan walked over to the bed where Heidi lay surrounded by her newborns. He leaned down and whispered, "We made it through the darkest night together, and from now on, I won't let you be alone again." Heidi opened her eyes. Her gaze was tired, but deep. Her ears perked ever so slightly, and her tail gave a faint wag. The promise had been heard, and it had been accepted. The clinic's small van rolled slowly along the cobblestone road leading to the suburban neighborhood. The sky had cleared, and raindrops still clinging to the leaves sparkled under the soft sunlight. In the back seat, Heidi lay on a thick cushion, surrounded by her 4 tiny sleeping puppies. Ryan sat beside her, his gaze quietly following every little movement of the pups, as if blinking might make this miracle vanish. The van stopped in front of an old apartment block, the ground floor featuring a large window that faced a patch of grass. Ryan opened the door and stepped down gently, lifting the cushion carrying his new family. A few curious neighbors peeked from their doorways, but Ryan only gave a small nod in greeting and walked straight into his apartment. Inside, everything was once neat and cold, the kind of order that belonged to a single retired military man, but that had changed. In one corner, a large nest had been made from soft blankets, clean and neatly arranged. Water bowls, padded mats, and a heating lamp were all ready. A whiteboard was mounted on the wall, listing feeding times, each puppy's weight, and scheduled checkups with Ellie for the coming weeks. Every detail had been carefully prepared. Heidi stepped in slow, but steady. She sniffed every corner of the room, inspecting with a mother's instinct and the cautiousness of a creature that had once been abandoned. Ryan didn't rush her. He simply sat down on the floor, patting the carpet softly. "This is home now. No more abandoned factories. No more cold. No more being left behind." Heidi paused. She looked at him, her eyes as if weighing his words. Then, gently, she walked over, circled behind him, lay down right beside him, and rested her head on his leg. From the nest, one of the puppies whimpered faintly, responding to its mother's movement. Heidi lifted her head, listened for a moment, then lowered it again as if to say, "I'm at ease now." Ryan smiled, a rare, genuine smile. That afternoon, Carlos, the neighbor who rarely spoke, knocked on the door. When he saw the puppies, his face lit up. "My God, they're adorable," You saved them, didn't you, Ryan? Replied simply. They saved me. News about Ryan and Heidi quickly spread through the neighborhood. People who once kept to themselves started leaving dog food by his door. An elderly woman from the upstairs apartment brought down a handmade knitted rug. Children came by the window begging to see the puppies. Somehow Ryan's little apartment, once the quiet shelter of a withdrawn veteran, had become the warmest place on the block. At night, with only the soft golden glow of the nightlight and the steady breathing of the little ones filling the room, Ryan sat in a wooden chair by the window, jotting notes in his notebook. Day 14. Heidi and the pups are adapting well. Scout has opened his eyes. Ranger yawns a lot. Luna loves to cuddle. Max is quiet, but never leaves his mother's side. He paused, and below that line he wrote, "For the first time since coming home, I don't feel like I'm living alone anymore." 2 weeks later, the morning at Ryan's apartment complex was unusually lively. The front door was ajar, and guests were invited in to see the puppies. Young couples, elderly folks, families with small children, all were personally interviewed by Ellie, the dedicated veterinarian. She carefully reviewed each file, asking about schedules, living space, dog care experience, and most importantly, their emotional readiness. Ryan stood silently beside her, his eyes watching Heidi's every reaction. Each time someone approached, Heidi showed no anxiety. She simply sat there, proud and observant. But what moved Ryan most was her gaze and expression that seemed to read each person. Scout was chosen by a primary school teacher. She brought a notebook, diligently taking notes on every care instruction. Heidi sniffed her hand for a few seconds, then gently licked the back of it, a sign of approval. Ranger was picked up by a young boy with autism. The moment the boy held him, Ranger laid perfectly still in his lap. The boy didn't say a word. He just looked up at Ryan and gave a tiny nod. Ryan turned away to hide his suddenly teary eyes. Luna found her home with an elderly couple who had lost their golden retriever after 13 years. When Luna burrowed into the woman's arms and let out a small sigh, everyone knew she had found the right place. Only Max remained, the big, quiet pup who always stayed close to his mother. Ryan knelt down to stroke Max's head, when suddenly Heidi stepped forward. Once again, like that night in the abandoned factory, she gently picked Max up by the scruff and placed him in Ryan's lap. This time, she didn't walk away, nor did she lie down. Heidi sat upright, eyes fixed on Ryan, unblinking. A hush fell over the room. Ellie stepped closer and whispered she's made her choice again. Ryan looked down at Max. Those innocent eyes looked back at him with an almost unbelievable trust. "This boy stays," Ryan said without hesitation. "His name is Soldier." The room held its breath for a heartbeat. Then Ellie smiled. "And you've just officially become the father of one brave mother and a brand new little warrior." That afternoon, after Scout, Luna, and Ranger had gone off to their new homes, Ryan stood on the balcony. Soldier in his arms, Heidi resting beside his feet. The evening sun stretched across the balcony, casting a golden glow over the face of a man whose years had once been etched with fatigue. But today, those wounds no longer felt cold. "We did it, Heidi," he whispered. "We didn't give up, and now we're a family." Heidi gave a subtle nod as if she understood. Soldier nestled deeper into Ryan's arms, letting out his first tiny snore. On the table sat a new photo frame. A picture taken that rainy night. Heidi lying in Ryan's arms, surrounded by the 4 tiny lives she had just brought into the world. Beneath the frame, Ryan had written in pencil, "From darkness, we gave birth to hope, and that hope has 4 paws, a courageous heart, and a soul that never gave up. Not all heroes wear capes, Some once wore uniforms, survived war, and carried wounds no one could see. Some were abandoned in a cold, indifferent world, yet never gave up the most sacred duty to be a mother. Ryan and Heidi. Two souls seemingly shattered crossed paths in a moment no one could have predicted. A rainy night, an abandoned factory, a cry of pain, a whispered promise, "I won't leave you." From fear they found trust, from pain they discovered hope, and from helplessness they created something miraculous, 4 tiny lives, stepping bravely into the world. None of them were perfect, but in each other, they found what the outside world had long forgotten, a family. Heidi wasn't just a mother dog. She was a symbol of unconditional love and unwavering loyalty. Ryan wasn't just a veteran. He was a man returning from the darkest corners of life, carrying a light kindled by Heidi's presence. And if you're still reading these final lines, maybe you too are like them, wandering through doubt, pain, or endless nights. But remember this, somewhere out there, there is always a Heidi waiting for you, a reason to open your heart. Step out of the shadows and start again. Because sometimes, in order to be saved, we must first save someone else. Thank you for walking beside Ryan and Heidi and their tiny miracles. If this story touched your heart, please share it, because the act of kindness you offer today might just be someone's miracle tomorrow.